She called me useless and left me, but now she begs for me after seeing what I became. You know, sometimes life breaks you before it builds you. This is my story. A story of love, betrayal, heartbreak, and eventually, the sweetest form of revenge. I never thought I would one day look back and thank the person who once tore me apart. But life is strange like that. Let me take you back to where it all began. I wasn't born into wealth or privilege. My family lived modestly. My father worked hard, but never earned much, and my mother stretched every penny to keep food on the table. From a young age, I knew that if I wanted anything in life, I'd have to work for it. And that's exactly what I did. By the time I was a teenager, I was already juggling part-time jobs, delivering newspapers in the morning, cleaning tables at a small cafe after school, anything that put a little money in my pocket. It wasn't easy, but it taught me responsibility. Still, despite all that, I carried this fire inside me. I wanted more. I wanted to build a better life than the one I was born into. I didn't want to struggle forever. That's around the time I met Emily. She was different from anyone I had ever met. She had this charm, this confidence, and she always carried herself like she deserved the best in life. The first time we talked, she laughed at my jokes. She told me she liked the way I thought big, even though I didn't have much. To me, she felt like a dream. I thought finally, someone sees me for who I am, not for what I have. In the beginning, things were beautiful. We went on long walks, stayed up late talking about the future, and shared simple moments that felt priceless. I didn't have money to buy her fancy gifts, but I gave her everything I could, my time, my love, my loyalty. For a while, it seemed like she was happy with that. She told me she loved my ambition. She said she believed in me when no one else did, and I believed her. But slowly, things began to change. As the months turned into years, she grew restless. She wanted more experiences, more luxury, more of the life she saw on social media or in her friends' lives. Meanwhile, I was stuck in a cycle of work and bills. I worked long hours in a small job that barely paid enough to survive. I would come home tired, with just enough energy to eat something simple and crash on the bed. But despite all that, I had big dreams. I believed that if I worked hard enough, one day life would change. Unfortunately, Emily didn't see it that way. She didn't see the long nights I stayed awake planning. She didn't see the extra hours I put in at work, or the determination burning inside me. No, what she saw was what I didn't have. She saw the car I didn't drive, the money I couldn't spend, the house I couldn't afford. She compared me to men who were already successful, men who had the things I could only dream of, and in her eyes, I came up short every single time. Remember trying to explain to her that life doesn't change overnight, that success takes time. I begged her to be patient, to believe in me the way she used to. But her responses grew colder. She started making little comments that cut deep. Things like, "Maybe you'll never get there," or, "I need a man who can actually provide." Those words stung, but I ignored them, hoping things would get better. There were small moments that revealed how far apart we had grown. One evening, I surprised her with a simple gift, a book she had once mentioned wanting to read. I wrapped it in plain paper and gave it to her after work, smiling because I thought she'd be touched. But instead of being happy, she looked disappointed. She said, "Other girls get jewelry and I get a book? You'll never change, will you?" That moment broke something inside me. It wasn't about the book. It was about how little she valued the effort behind it. Still, I kept trying. I thought love meant sticking it out through the hard times. I thought if I just worked harder, if I just held on longer, she would see that I was worth it. But while I was holding on, she was slowly letting go. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Friday evening. I had just returned home from work, my clothes soaked with sweat, my hands sore, my back aching. I was starving because I had skipped lunch to save a little money. I walked in expecting comfort, maybe a warm smile, maybe dinner waiting, or at least someone to ask how my day went. Instead, I found her standing there with her bags packed. The look on her face was cold, distant, almost like I was a stranger. My heart started racing. I asked her what was going on, but she didn't waste any time. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "You are useless. I can't live like this anymore." Those 6 words shattered me. My mind went blank. My chest tightened. I couldn't even breathe. Before I could say a single word, before I could beg her to stay, before I could promise her that things would get better, she picked up her bags, walked past me, and closed the door behind her. The sound of that door shutting still echoes in my head. Just like that, years of love, years of memories ended in silence. I stood there frozen, staring at the empty doorway, not knowing what to do. I didn't even chase her. My legs wouldn't move. My mouth was dry. My chest felt crushed under the weight of those words. "You are useless." That night, I sat in the dark for hours. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I just replayed everything in my head. Every smile we once shared, every promise we once made, every sacrifice I thought meant something. It all came crashing down. The more I thought about it, the more her words consumed me. "You are useless." I started whispering to myself, maybe she's right. Maybe I really am useless. The days that followed were a blur of emptiness. At work, I couldn't focus. I made mistakes. My boss yelled at me, and my coworkers noticed how withdrawn I had become. Walking home was torture because every corner reminded me of her. Our favorite cafe, the park bench where we first kissed, the shop where we used to buy snacks late at night. Everywhere I went, memories haunted me. Weekends were the worst. I hated the silence of my room, the empty chair where she once sat, the absence of her voice. Friends tried to cheer me up, but I pushed them away. I didn't want fake smiles or empty advice. I just wanted her back. But deep down, I knew she wasn't coming. It's painful when the world calls you a failure, but it's unbearable when that judgment comes from the person you love most. Her voice became louder than my own thoughts. Every time I looked in the mirror, I didn't see myself anymore. I saw the useless man she described. But here's the thing about pain. Sometimes it can either destroy you or it can wake you up. And as I sat in that silence, something inside me refused to accept that this was my fate. A small voice in my heart whispered, "No, this isn't the end. This is the beginning." Didn't know how or when, but I promised myself I wouldn't stay that broken man forever. That night, the same pain that crushed me also planted a seed inside me. A spark that would eventually grow into a fire strong enough to change everything. That was the night I decided. If she saw me as useless, then I would work until the entire world saw me as unstoppable. And that's where my journey truly began. The next morning, I woke up to the same small, dimly lit room I had been living in for years. Nothing had changed physically. No furniture, no luxury, not even a proper breakfast. But inside, something had shifted. I had no money, no friends, no support. And yet, I had something infinitely more powerful, a burning determination. I started with small jobs that most people would turn their noses up at. I cleaned floors at office buildings, mopped through sticky spills in grocery stores, and carried heavy boxes in warehouses where supervisors barked orders like drill sergeants. The work was grueling, exhausting, and sometimes humiliating. I would arrive before sunrise and leave long after everyone else had gone home. My body ached constantly, my hands blistered, my feet were sore. But I kept moving. Every insult thrown my way, every smirk from colleagues or strangers, became fuel for the fire I was building inside me. But I wasn't just working for money. I was working for transformation. I needed to rebuild not just my bank account, but my identity. I spent my nights reading. I devoured every book I could find on business, personal development, financial literacy, and success stories. While others were scrolling mindlessly through social media or binge-watching shows, I was teaching myself skills that I hoped would change my life. I learned how to budget, how to negotiate, how to write emails that demanded attention, how to analyze spreadsheets, and even how to stay disciplined when life tried to break me down. In the beginning, progress was painfully slow. Weeks passed, where I felt no difference at all. I would work from dawn till dusk and still return home feeling like I was in the same place. I cried more times than I could count. I doubted myself constantly. Some nights, hunger gnawed at my stomach, but I refused to give up. I slept on an empty stomach, telling myself that the sacrifice today would become my success tomorrow. Every time her words replayed in my head, "You are useless," I turned them into a mantra. I whispered it under my breath while scrubbing floors. I said it while running through the rain. I said it while learning something new that I had previously thought was impossible. Those words, once meant to wound me, had now become the reason I refused to quit. I began waking up earlier than ever before. At first, it was just 30 minutes earlier, then an hour, then 2. I used those early mornings for quiet reflection, reading, and exercise. I ran along the empty streets, letting the cold air sting my lungs. I lifted weights I could barely manage, forcing my body to grow stronger, tougher. I kept reminding myself, a strong mind needed a strong body, and a strong body would never let a weak mind dominate. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. I didn't notice at first, but slowly, I was transforming. My small jobs began to teach me invaluable lessons. I learned patience from long hours of menial work. I learned humility from doing things I never imagined I would have to do. I learned perseverance from seeing how far I could push my body and mind when everything inside me screamed to stop. I started saving every penny I could. Even a few dollars saved each week became a statement to myself that I could control something, that I could prepare for a future that once seemed impossible. I also started experimenting with small side hustles. I offered to do odd jobs for neighbors, typing, letters, helping with deliveries, running errands. Each small success built confidence. Every satisfied customer, every dollar earned with my own effort, reminded me that I was capable of more than anyone had ever given me credit for. I learned quickly that even when life refuses to give you a hand, there are always small steps forward if you are willing to crawl toward them. Not everything was smooth. There were setbacks that almost broke me completely. I remember one week vividly. My car broke down. My job hours were cut due to low demand, and one of my side clients refused to pay for work I had done honestly and on time. I came home feeling defeated, tears blurring my vision, wondering if I had been foolish to dream so big. But then I remembered the nights I had trained my body until it screamed, the hours I had spent learning when others were sleeping, and I reminded myself that nothing worth having ever comes easy. Slowly, little victories began stacking up. I finally landed a slightly better paying job. The manager trusted me with more responsibilities. I earned recognition not for my charm, but for my hard work and consistency. I began to see that people respect effort, discipline, and honesty. I continued to invest in myself at night, learning advanced skills, digital tools, spreadsheet mastery, customer relations, and even basic accounting. I stayed up late many nights with just a lamp and a notebook, writing down strategies, reflecting on mistakes, and planning my next steps. Every small success reinforced my confidence. I remember the first time I paid a bill on time without borrowing money. I remember the first month I had a tiny surplus in my bank account. I remember the first time a client complimented me on my work. These moments were tiny, almost invisible to the world, but they were monumental to me. Every one of them chipped away at the useless man she had left behind. I also built discipline in habits most people overlook. I prepared my meals ahead of time to save money. I tracked my expenses religiously. I woke up early even when it was freezing, even when I was exhausted. I forced myself to stay organized, to prioritize, to plan my weeks carefully. I realized that the smallest routines, done consistently, were more powerful than grand gestures that lacked discipline. Over time, my network began to grow quietly. People noticed my reliability, my work ethic, and my willingness to take responsibility. I became someone people could count on. It was a slow rise, invisible to most, but undeniable to me. With each passing year, the useless label lost its grip. Then came my first real breakthrough. I'd been saving, learning, and networking, and a small business opportunity appeared. It wasn't glamorous or guaranteed, but I poured my savings and my energy into it. I worked day and night, often sleeping only a few hours. I took risks, made mistakes, learned from them, and kept going. Slowly, what started as a side project grew. Clients returned. Referrals came. Profits, once minuscule, began to grow steadily. Won't pretend it was easy, or that I became rich overnight. There were nights of doubt, of fear, of feeling like it wasn't worth it. I had moments of wanting to give up, to crawl back to the comfort of old routines. But I couldn't. I remembered the person who had called me useless, who had left me when I had nothing, and I refused to let that define my life. Years passed. The boy who once struggled to buy groceries became a man who could make payroll. The man who had nowhere to sleep became the one offering opportunities to others. Every new milestone, my first car, my first apartment, my first profitable quarter, felt like a victory not just over circumstance but over the doubt that had haunted me for so long. And then, one evening as I was driving home after a long day of work, my phone buzzed. I looked down and froze. The name flashing on the screen was hers, Emily. My stomach tightened, my heart beat faster. She had left me when I had nothing. And now, years later, when she saw the man I had become, she wanted to reach out. Her message was simple, but the weight behind it crushed me and lifted me at the same time. Can we talk? I sat there in the car, staring at the glowing screen, a small smile forming. She had left me when I was at my lowest, but now she was reaching out to the man who had clawed his way to something she never thought possible. I didn't respond. Immediately. I didn't rush to give her closure or to validate her feelings. Instead, I sat back, letting the wind from the open window brush my face. I thought about the long nights of pain, the small victories, the discipline, the sweat, the tears, and the man I had become. The question wasn't whether I wanted her back. The question was whether I still needed anyone to validate me, or whether I had finally become the man I was meant to be, independent of anyone else's approval. I realized then that this moment, this message, was not a test of love or forgiveness. It was a mirror. She had called me useless, and now she was looking at a man she could no longer control, a man she could no longer define. And in that, I found a strange satisfaction. I didn't need to prove anything to her. I only needed to keep proving to myself that I was capable, strong, and unstoppable. And that was the real turning point, the point where the boy who had been left broken became the man who would never again allow anyone else's opinion to dictate his worth. The days turned into weeks, the weeks into months, and slowly, imperceptibly at first, my life began to change. Every drop of sweat, every long night, every tear I had shed while lying awake thinking of her words, "You are useless," was finally beginning to pay off. I realized that success doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't announce itself with a bang. It creeps up quietly in the early mornings, in the late nights, in the unnoticed efforts that no one sees but you. I started to see the results in small ways at first. A client who once ignored my calls began to trust me with a bigger project. A neighbor who had seen me struggle now asked me to help with their own business. I started getting recognition, small at first, but it made me feel like the boy who once had nothing was slowly stepping into a new world. Every little acknowledgement reminded me that I was not the same man she had left behind. I bought my first real car. It wasn't flashy, not even close, but it was mine, bought with my hard-earned money. I still remember sliding into the driver's seat for the first time, feeling a mix of pride and disbelief. The smell of the new interior, the hum of the engine starting, it was a tangible reminder that I had worked for something real, something lasting. That car wasn't just a vehicle, it was freedom. It was proof that I could achieve what once seemed impossible. Then came my first apartment, bare walls, a small kitchen, a bed that didn't squeak, yet it was mine. Walking through it for the first time, I stopped in the living room and just looked around. No one had made it for me. I had built this with my own hands, my own determination, and every challenge I had overcome. For the first time, I realized that my worth was no longer defined by someone else's perception. It was defined by what I could create, what I could endure, and what I could accomplish. The business began to grow steadily. What had started as a tiny side project now demanded more of my attention and skill than anything else I had done. I hired my first employee, a young man named Carlos, who had potential but needed guidance. Teaching him, mentoring him, seeing him grow alongside me, gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't felt before. Leadership was new and daunting, but I embraced it. I had learned the value of persistence, and now I was learning the value of helping others persist as well. The transformation was not only financial, it was deeply personal. I grew mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. I learned to trust my instincts, to take calculated risks, to make decisions confidently without seeking approval from anyone else. I learned to celebrate small victories, finishing a complicated project, receiving genuine praise from a client, saving a substantial sum of money. Each victory, no matter how minor it seemed, reminded me that I had come a long way from the man who had been left broken in a cold, empty room. Yet the road was far from smooth. For every success, there were setbacks. Suppliers delayed deliveries, clients changed their minds, and unexpected expenses threatened to wipe out months of hard work. I faced legal challenges, accounting mistakes, and countless sleepless nights, trying to solve problems I had no prior experience with. Some nights, I cried quietly in my office, overwhelmed by the weight of responsibility, the fear of failure, and the haunting memory of her words. But each challenge reinforced a lesson I had learned early on. Growth comes through adversity. Every obstacle was a test of my resilience, and every solution I found made me stronger, smarter, more capable. Slowly, people began to notice. Former colleagues, neighbors, even strangers who had once overlooked me began to seek my guidance. They didn't know my story. They didn't know the pain or the nights of struggle, but they could see the results. A man who was disciplined, reliable, and relentlessly focused. And then, the day came that changed everything. I received an invitation to a local business networking event, the kind of event I had once only dreamed of attending. The room was filled with people who were accomplished, confident, and influential. I walked in, my heart steady, my posture tall, knowing I belonged here not because of luck, not because of charm, but because I had earned it. As I navigated the crowd, exchanging handshakes and pleasantries, I saw a familiar face. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, but as she moved closer, my heart skipped a beat. It was Emily, the same woman who had left me when I was at my lowest, the same woman who had called me useless and walked away without looking back. She froze when she saw me, her eyes widening in disbelief. I could see the shock, the confusion, and perhaps a twinge of regret flicker across her face. She walked toward me cautiously, as if afraid that the man standing before her might reject her outright. And then she said it. The words that both stung and satisfied me simultaneously. I can't believe this is you. You've become so successful. I made a mistake leaving you. I listened quietly. She went on to explain how life had not gone as she had hoped, how the people she pursued for status and wealth had abandoned her when she no longer had something to offer. She admitted with a trembling voice that she had realized too late what she had lost. Her words were heavy, laden with regret and longing, but they no longer held power over me in the same way. I smiled, softly, almost imperceptibly. The man she once abandoned, the man she once called useless, had grown into someone she could no longer control, someone she could no longer define. I didn't need to prove anything. My life, my success, my strength, all of it was proof enough. I said gently, yet firmly, "You were right to leave. If you hadn't, I wouldn't have pushed myself this far. But the man standing in front of you, he is no longer waiting for anyone's approval." Her face fell, a mix of surprise and sorrow, as if she had finally realized the cost of her choices. She tried to speak, tried to plead, but I already knew the answer. My heart had moved on. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't angry. I was free. In that moment, I understood the truth. The greatest revenge isn't about confrontation or shouting. It isn't about proving someone wrong or making them feel pain. The greatest revenge is living your best life. It's proving to yourself every day that you are capable, that you are strong, and that no one else's words can define your worth. Emily's presence that night was merely a reflection of my journey. She called me useless and left, but her actions had inadvertently fueled the man I had become. The pain she caused me became the fire that transformed me. And now, standing here, I realized that I had achieved more than she could have imagined, and all without needing her approval. This was the true rise to success. Not just the money, the car, or the apartment. Not just the business or the recognition, but the inner growth, the confidence, the resilience, and the knowledge that I was no longer defined by anyone else. And that was the beginning of the next chapter. The chapter where the boy who was once abandoned became the man who could stand, tall in any room, face any challenge, and never again be called useless. I had thought I had left the past behind. I had worked, bled, and sacrificed to build a life that was mine, independent of anyone else's approval. I had grown strong, confident, and self-assured. Yet life has a strange way of bringing the past back to test you, to remind you of where you came from, and to see if you have truly grown. It was a crisp evening, the city lights flickering softly against the darkening sky. I had been attending a business networking event, exchanging ideas and shaking hands with people who had once been out of my league. The event hall was buzzing with conversation, the smell of coffee and expensive perfume filling the air. I felt confident, composed, fully in my element. This was my world now, a world I had built with my own hands, my own determination, my own relentless will. And then I saw her, across the crowded room, her eyes locked onto mine. My heart skipped a beat, not from fear, not from longing, but from recognition. There she was, Emily, the woman who had walked out of my life years ago, leaving me broken, abandoned, and questioning my worth. She looked different, older, more polished, as if life had forced her to grow in ways I had already mastered. Yet beneath the surface, I could see the same hesitation, the same vulnerability I remembered from years ago. She froze, staring at me as if the man standing before her was a stranger. The realization of who I had become seemed to hit her like a physical blow. I could see it in her eyes, surprise, disbelief, and perhaps a twinge of regret. The confident, self-assured woman I had once known now looked uncertain, almost fragile, and for the first time I realized the power had shifted. She approached slowly, as if unsure whether I would even acknowledge her. Every step she took was measured, cautious, tentative. When she finally reached me, she paused, searching my face for some sign of the boy she had once left behind. I didn't flinch. I didn't smile immediately. I simply regarded her with the calm, quiet confidence of someone who had endured more than she could ever imagine. I can't believe this is you, she said, her voice wavering slightly. You've become so successful. I made a mistake leaving you. Her words hit me differently this time. Before, her voice had cut me down, crushed my spirit, and left me questioning everything about myself. Now, they were different, full of awe, tinged with regret, and almost desperate. I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and indifference. Satisfaction because she finally saw what she had lost. Indifference because her approval no longer mattered. She went on, telling me about her life after leaving. She described the people she had chased, the shallow relationships that had promised status but delivered emptiness, the heartbreaks that had accumulated one after another. She admitted, almost tearfully, that she had realized too late what she had truly lost, the man she had abandoned. Listening to her, I felt a calm detachment. I remembered the nights I had cried alone, the long hours of sacrifice, the moments. I had doubted myself and yet pressed on. Every struggle, every tear, every sleepless night had brought me here, to this very moment. And now she was confronting the consequences of her own choices. I smiled softly, letting the weight of the years and the journey I had undertaken reflect in that small, quiet expression. I wanted her to understand that the man she had once discarded was no longer dependent on her validation. I wanted her to see that the fire she had ignited through pain had forged someone stronger, wiser, and unstoppable. "You were right to leave," I said, my voice steady, calm, yet carrying the gravity of all I had endured. "If you hadn't, I wouldn't have pushed myself this far. But the man standing in front of you, he is no longer waiting for anyone's approval." Her expression shifted. Surprise, confusion, and a flicker of fear danced across her face. She opened her mouth, searching for words, perhaps hoping to undo the damage, perhaps trying to reclaim something she had lost. But the truth was already clear. Nothing she said could change what I had become. I had grown, I had thrived, and I had built a life that did not need her. She tried to reach out, to plead, to explain, to beg for another chance. I watched her, silently observing every gesture, every word, every hesitation. And in that observation, I felt the full weight of my own journey. Every insult she had thrown, every doubt she had planted, every moment of rejection had become the fuel for my transformation. And now, here she was, seeing the result of that transformation and realizing too late what she had lost. I didn't need to argue. I didn't need to justify myself. My life, my achievements, my strength, they spoke louder than any words could. The sweetest revenge, I realized, was not confrontation or vindictiveness. It was the simple, undeniable fact that I had risen above the pain, above the heartbreak, and above her judgment. I had become someone who could stand tall, confident, and free, regardless of her presence or absence. And yet, despite the calm exterior, a wave of reflection washed over me. I thought of the countless nights I had spent alone, questioning my worth. I remembered the moments of despair, the small victories that no one celebrated with me, the sacrifices I had made that no one witnessed. Every challenge, every setback, every moment of self-doubt had been part of the journey that led me here. I realized then that her arrival, her words, her regret, it was merely a mirror. She was seeing what she had missed, but more importantly, I was seeing the culmination of all my efforts reflected back at me. I had survived, I had endured, I had conquered. And I had done it without needing her validation, without needing her presence, without needing her approval. She stepped closer, her eyes searching mine for something, perhaps forgiveness, perhaps reconciliation, perhaps acknowledgement. But I knew that the true resolution was not in her hands. The resolution had already been achieved within me. The boy who had once been broken, abandoned, and called useless had become a man who could face any challenge, overcome any obstacle, and stand tall in the face of anyone who doubted him. I took a deep breath, letting the moment linger. There was no anger, no bitterness, no desire to hurt her. There was only calm, quiet satisfaction. I had proven something far greater than her approval could ever convey. I had proven it to myself. And as I walked away from that conversation, from that room, from that moment, I felt a freedom unlike any I had ever known. The past was behind me. The pain had been transformed into strength. The rejection had been transformed into resolve. The insult that once crushed me had become the foundation of everything I had built. She had called me useless and left me. But now, looking at her hesitation, her surprise, and her regret, I knew that the man she had abandoned had become something far greater than she could have imagined. And in that realization, I found peace. I had achieved the sweetest form of revenge, not through anger, not through confrontation, but through living a life that no one, not even the person who hurt me the most, could take away. The room was quiet after our conversation, a strange stillness settling over everything. She had spoken, admitted her mistakes, begged for a second chance, but I remained calm, almost serene. For years, I had carried the weight of her words, her judgment, and the emptiness she left behind. Now, I realized something crucial. The greatest revenge was not found in confrontation, not in anger, not in making someone else feel small. The greatest revenge was in living a life so full, so accomplished, and so beautiful that the person who doubted you could only watch in awe. I stepped away from her, my mind reflecting on everything I had endured to reach this point. Every sleepless night, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt had been worth it. I remembered the days when I had nothing but determination and pain. I had started at the bottom, cleaning floors, carrying heavy loads, doing work that most people would overlook. I had been invisible, undervalued, and dismissed. And now, standing here, I realized that my life had transformed completely. I was no longer the man she once called useless. Walking through the streets after leaving the event, I thought about how life had shaped me. I remembered how every obstacle, every failure had been a stepping stone. The man she had abandoned had become someone who could create opportunities, inspire others, and face challenges without fear. I had built a business, a home, a life that I could call my own, and with each success, my sense of self-worth had grown. I had learned that real power does not come from controlling others. It comes from controlling yourself, your actions, your focus, and your determination. Days turned into weeks, and the encounter with her lingered in my mind. I realized that her attempt to reconnect was not truly about love. It was about recognizing what she had lost. But I also knew that my heart had changed. I was no longer waiting for anyone to complete me. I was whole on my own, strong and independent. The man I had become did not need validation from those who once doubted him. In the weeks that followed, I focused even more on my business, my health, and my personal growth. I expanded my ventures, taking risks that I had once been too afraid to take. I hired more employees, mentored young entrepreneurs, and became a figure that others looked up to. Every new project was not just a financial gain, but a reaffirmation of my resilience, my intelligence, and my ability to overcome obstacles. 1. Morning, while reviewing financial reports, I received a text message from Emily. Simple words. I miss you. Can we meet? I stared at the message for a long moment, feeling a mix of emotions. There was a part of me that remembered the good times, the connection we once shared. But the larger part of me remembered the pain, the tears, the nights I had spent questioning my worth. I knew what she wanted. She wanted the comfort of a man who had rebuilt himself after being broken. She wanted the safety and stability I had created, and she wanted to reclaim what she had lost. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I reflected on what I had learned. The true sweetness of my revenge was not cruelty. It was freedom. It was the knowledge that I could live my life fully without her. I realized that I didn't need to punish her with words. My life was already the punishment for her past mistake. The man she had left behind had become everything she thought he could never be, and that reality alone was more satisfying than any argument, confrontation, or insult could ever be. I decided to meet her, but not to reconcile. I met her in a quiet cafe, somewhere neutral, calm, and unassuming. When she saw me, her eyes widened once again, this time with a mixture of hope and fear. She smiled nervously, the same smile she had once used to charm me, but it held no power over me now. "I've changed," she said softly. "I've realized what I lost. I made a huge mistake. I want to try again." I looked at her for a long moment, letting the words settle in. I thought about all the nights I had spent alone, all the tears, all the hard work. I thought about the man I had become, the confidence, the independence, the strength that I had earned through pain and persistence. "I know you want a second chance," I said finally, my voice calm but firm. "But I'm not the man you left behind. I am not waiting for anyone's approval anymore. The man you abandoned has grown, thrived, and become unstoppable. My life is my own, and it doesn't need you to be complete." She looked down, the realization hitting her. I could see it, the mix of regret, longing, and a hint of fear. She understood, finally, that the life I had built was mine alone, and she could not step back into it without facing the consequences of her past actions. And in that moment, I felt a sense of liberation that words cannot capture. I had achieved what I had worked for all those years. Not wealth alone, not status alone, but freedom. Freedom from the past, freedom from her judgment, and freedom from anyone who doubted my worth. I smiled gently, a smile that carried both warmth and quiet triumph. "The best revenge," I said softly, "is living well. It's being happy, being strong, and being free. You see me now, not because of what you did or didn't do, but because I chose to rise above it all." She remained silent, her eyes glistening, perhaps realizing the truth. The man she had once called useless was no longer the same person she thought she knew. He was someone who had turned pain into power, rejection into motivation, and heartbreak into growth. Weeks passed, and life continued to unfold in its own way. I focused on building more, creating more, and inspiring more. I traveled, invested, and helped others achieve their dreams. Each day I was reminded that the insult, the heartbreak, and the abandonment had been the catalyst for everything I had become. Occasionally, Emily tried to reach out. Messages, calls, subtle hints that she wanted back into my life. But I remained unmoved. My path was clear, my purpose unshakable. I had learned that forgiveness does not mean reconciliation. I could forgive the past, release the pain, and move forward without her. The ultimate lesson, I realized, is that the people who doubt us, who leave us, and who call us useless are often the very reason we rise higher than we ever imagined. The insult that broke me had become the foundation of my growth. The abandonment that crushed me had become the spark that ignited my journey. And so, the story comes full circle. I was once an ordinary man, struggling to survive, undervalued, and dismissed. I was abandoned by someone I loved, left alone with nothing but the echo of cruel words. But through resilience, hard work, and unwavering determination, I transformed myself into a man of strength, confidence, and freedom. I had built a life that no one could take from me, a life defined not by others, but by my own choices and actions. Emily's presence, her attempts to reconnect, and her acknowledgement of my success were only reminders of how far I had come. The greatest revenge was not vengeance. It was transformation. It was freedom. It was living a life so full, so authentic, and so unstoppable that no one, not even the person who once doubted you, could diminish it. In the end, I understood that true power does not lie in revenge or anger. It lies in growth, resilience, and self-mastery. The man who was called useless had become a symbol of what is possible when you refuse to be defined by anyone else's perception. She called me useless and left me. But now she could only watch as I thrived, as I lived, and as I proved that my worth was never in her hands. The man I had become was unstoppable, and that, more than anything, was the sweetest revenge of all. And that, my friends, is the story of how pain became power, heartbreak became motivation, and abandonment became the catalyst for a life beyond imagination.